They called it a rock, just a rock, a stupid, gray, worthless piece of the mountain that had been sitting on a roadside since before anyone could remember. The Imperial Army commander looked at it once, maybe twice, and kept driving. He had 4 tons of steel armor beneath him. He had machine guns. He had a radio that could call down artillery strikes from 10 kilometers away. What he didn't have was respect for the farmer who put that rock there, and that was his last mistake. Before we head into the mountains of Hebei province, tell me where you're watching from, because this story starts in a place most maps forgot, a place where metal was so scarce that the people had to turn the earth itself into a weapon. This is the story of Liu Deshi, a man who had nothing, a man who fought the Japanese Empire with dirt, sweat, and a rock that everyone ignored, until it wasn't just a rock anymore. Hebei province, northern China, winter, 1943. The village of Shituwan, which meant stone bowl, had exactly 3 things in abundance: rocks, hunger, and fear. Liu Deshi was 31 years old, but his hands looked 60. The knuckles were swollen from years of breaking stone in the quarry. His back was crooked from hauling loads that should have been carried by mules. But the Japanese had taken the mules. They had taken the rice. They had taken his younger brother, Xiaoming, and sent him to work on the railways in Manchuria. Xiaoming never came back. Now, Liu Deshi lived alone in a stone hut at the edge of the village, with nothing but his dead father's pickaxe and a growing cold hatred that sat in his chest like a frozen river. The Imperial Army had occupied Hebei province for 6 years. At first, they came with promises. Cooperation brings prosperity, the poster said. But prosperity never arrived. Only soldiers. Only demands. Every month, the convoys rolled through Shituwan. Tanks, trucks, half-tracks loaded with supplies heading west toward the front lines. The villagers were ordered to line the roads and bow. If you didn't bow, you were beaten. If you bowed too slowly, you were beaten anyway. Liu Deshi had stopped bowing 3 months ago. Not out of bravery, out of exhaustion. He simply didn't care anymore if they killed him. But they didn't kill him. They ignored him. One cold morning in December, Liu Deshi sat outside his hut, sharpening his pickaxe on a whetstone. The sound of grinding metal echoed off the mountainside. Scrape, scrape, scrape. A voice called out from the path below. "Liu, what are you doing up there, hiding like a coward?" It was Chen Guang, the village leader, a man in his 50s with a belly that hadn't suffered as much as everyone else's. Chen Guang had connections with the occupiers. He made sure the Japanese got their rice quotas on time. In exchange, his family ate. Liu Deshi didn't look up. He kept sharpening. Chen Guang climbed the hill, wheezing. When he reached the hut, he kicked a rock near Liu's foot. "You missed the convoy today," Chen said, annoyed. "The captain asked where you were." "I was here." "You need to show respect, Liu. These are dangerous times." Liu finally looked up. His eyes were flat, empty. "Respect," Liu said quietly, "is what you give someone who hasn't stolen everything from you." Chen's face flushed red. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a hiss. "You think you're brave? You think you're a hero? You're just a stubborn fool. The Empire is everywhere, Liu. You cannot fight a tank with a pickaxe." Liu Deshi looked at the pickaxe in his hands. Then he looked at the mountains behind his hut. Mountains made of stone that had been there for 1,000 years. "Maybe not a pickaxe," Liu said. Chen Guang snorted. "What then? A rock?" Liu didn't answer. Chen shook his head, disgusted. "You're wasting your life up here. When the soldiers come asking questions, don't expect me to protect you." He turned and walked back down the hill, muttering curses under his breath. Liu Deshi watched him go. Then he looked at the rock pile beside his hut. Dozens of stones, big ones, heavy ones, stones he had quarried himself over the years. A rock, he thought. Maybe. 3 days later, the Japanese convoy returned. But this time they didn't just pass through. This time they stopped. Liu Deshi was in the village square when the engines cut off. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. People froze. Children stopped playing. Even the dogs went quiet. The lead tank, a Type 97 Chiha, rolled to a stop in the center of the square. The hatch opened, and a man climbed out. Commander Sato. He was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a face that looked more like a schoolteacher than a soldier. But his uniform was spotless, his boots were polished, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Line up," Sato said in Mandarin. His accent was sharp, mechanical. The villagers obeyed. They formed a line in front of the tank, heads down, shoulders trembling. Sato walked slowly down the line, hands behind his back, inspecting them like livestock. He stopped in front of an old woman. She was holding a bundle of cloth, her grandson's winter coat. "Open it," Sato said. The woman's hands shook as she unfolded the cloth. Inside was a single rice ball. She had been saving it. Sato picked it up. He examined it. Then he threw it into the dirt and crushed it under his boot. "Hoarding," he said coldly. "Disobedience." He nodded to one of his soldiers. The soldier stepped forward and struck the old woman across the face with the butt of his rifle. No one moved. No one dared. Sato continued walking. He stopped in front of Chen Guang. "Village leader," Sato said, "your quota was short last month. 50 kilograms of rice, missing." Chen Guang's face went pale. He bowed deeply, stammering. "Honorable Commander, the harvest was poor. This year, the frost came early. We gave everything we had." Sato raised a hand. Silence. "I do not accept excuses," Sato said. "I accept results. You will provide the missing rice by the end of the week. If you cannot, I will burn one house for every kilogram you are short." Chen Guang's knees buckled. "Yes, Commander, yes. We will find it, I swear." Sato turned away, dismissing him like an insect. Then his eyes landed on Liu Deshi. Liu was standing at the end of the line. He was the only one not bowing. Sato walked toward him slowly, his boots crunching on the frozen ground. He stopped 1 meter away. "You," Sato said. "Why are you not bowing?" Liu Deshi didn't answer. The soldiers around the square tensed. Rifle bolts clicked. Sato tilted his head, studying Liu like a scientist examining a specimen. "Do you think you are brave?" Sato asked. His tone was curious, almost amused. Liu finally spoke. His voice was low, steady. "I think you are a thief." The square went silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. Sato's expression didn't change. He simply nodded, as if Liu had confirmed something he already suspected. "A thief," Sato repeated. He smiled. It was a thin, cold smile. "Interesting. And what will you do about it, Stone Man?" Liu didn't answer. Sato leaned closer. His voice dropped to a whisper, meant only for Liu. "You have no army, no weapons, no allies. You are nothing but dust on my boots." He straightened up and turned to his soldiers. "Let him live," Sato said. "He is harmless." The soldiers laughed. Sato climbed back into his tank. The engine roared to life. The convoy rolled out of the village, leaving deep tracks in the dirt. Liu Deshi stood there, fists clenched, watching the tank disappear down the mountain road. Chen Guang appeared beside him, his face twisted with fury. "You fool," Chen hissed. "You nearly got us all killed." Liu didn't respond. Chen grabbed his arm. "Listen to me, Liu. The commander is right. You are nothing. You cannot fight them. Do you understand? You cannot win." Liu Deshi pulled his arm free. He looked down at the dirt, at the tire tracks, at the crushed rice ball still lying in the mud. Then he looked back up the mountain, toward his hut, toward the pile of rocks. "Maybe I can't win," Liu said quietly, "but I can make them bleed." That night, Liu Deshi didn't sleep. He sat in his hut, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind howl through the cracks in the stone walls. His mind kept replaying the scene in the square. The old woman's blood in the dirt. The laughter, the crushing of the rice ball. "You are nothing." Sato's words echoed in his head. Nothing. Liu closed his eyes. He thought about his brother, Xiaoming. The last time he saw him, Xiaoming was 16 years old, being loaded onto a truck with 30 other boys. Xiaoming had looked back, just once, and Liu had seen the terror in his eyes. Liu never saw him again. He thought about his father, who had worked himself to death in the quarry, who had told Liu on his deathbed, "A man is measured by what he does when he has nothing left." Liu opened his eyes. He stood up. He walked outside into the freezing night air and looked at the pile of rocks beside his hut. He picked one up. It was heavy, rough, cold, just a rock, but in his hands, it felt like something else. It felt like a weapon. Liu Deshi set the rock down gently. He walked back into his hut and pulled out a small leather pouch from beneath his sleeping mat. Inside was a handful of black powder, sulfur and charcoal mixed together, left over from the old New Year fireworks his father used to make. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Liu looked at the rock. He looked at the powder, and for the first time in 6 years, he smiled. "One tank," he whispered to himself. "That's all I need." Liu Deshi worked by candlelight. The flame flickered against the stone walls of his hut, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts. He had chosen the rock carefully, a round stone, roughly 40 centimeters across, heavy enough to look natural on the roadside, but not so large that he couldn't carry it. Now came the hard part, hollowing it out. He placed the rock on the dirt floor and picked up his father's chisel. The metal was old, chipped at the edges, but still sharp. He positioned the tip against the center of the rock and raised his hammer. Tap. The sound was too loud. Liu froze, listening. Outside, the wind howled through the mountain pass. In the distance, a dog barked. But no footsteps, no voices. He exhaled slowly and struck again. Tap, tap, tap. Each strike sent a small chip of stone flying. It was slow work, agonizing. After an hour, he had only carved a depression the size of his fist. His hands were already cramping. By midnight, his palms were blistered and bleeding. The calluses had split open, and every strike of the hammer sent a jolt of pain up his arms. But he didn't stop. Tap, tap, tap. He thought about the old woman's face, the blood in the dirt. Tap, tap, tap. He thought about Xiaoming, loaded onto that truck, never coming home. Tap, tap, tap. The pain became rhythm. The rhythm became meditation. By the time the sun rose, the rock had a hollow cavity inside, deep enough to hold 2 handfuls of powder, maybe more. Liu set down the hammer. His fingers were numb. His shoulders burned. But the rock was ready. Almost. The black powder was the dangerous part. Liu had watched his father make fireworks when he was a boy. He remembered the ratios: sulfur, charcoal, saltpeter, but saltpeter was impossible to find. The Japanese had confiscated anything that could be used for explosives. So Liu had improvised. He had scraped the walls of the old village latrine, collecting the white crust that formed on the wooden beams. Potassium nitrate. It wasn't pure, but it would burn. Now, in his hut, he mixed the ingredients in a clay bowl. Charcoal from the cooking fire. Sulfur from the old medicine shop, stolen in the dead of night. And the nitrate, ground into a fine powder using a stone mortar. His hands trembled as he worked. One spark, one mistake, and the hut would explode. He treated the powder like it was a sleeping cobra, moving slowly, breathing shallowly, never letting his hands shake too much. The mixture was gray and grainy. It didn't look like much. It didn't smell like much either, just a faint, bitter scent of sulfur. But Liu knew the truth. This powder was death compressed into dust. He carefully funneled it into the hollow cavity of the rock, packing it tightly with a wooden dowel. When the cavity was full, he sealed the opening with wet clay and let it dry. Then he sat back, staring at the rock. It looked completely ordinary, just a gray stone, the kind you'd see on any mountain road. Perfect. Liu Deshi didn't tell anyone about the rock, not because he was afraid of betrayal, although that was part of it, but because he knew what they would say. You're insane, Liu. You're going to get us all killed. A rock cannot stop a tank. He could already hear Chen Guang's voice in his head, dripping with condescension. But on the third night, someone knocked on his door. Liu's hand went to the knife on his belt. He stood slowly, every muscle tense. "Who is it?" he called out. "It's me." The voice was young, familiar. Liu opened the door. Standing in the moonlight was Zhang Wei, a boy of 17. He was thin, with nervous eyes and dirt under his fingernails. His father had been executed by the Japanese 2 years ago for hiding rice. "What do you want?" Liu asked. Zhang Wei glanced over his shoulder, making sure no one was watching. Then he stepped inside quickly and closed the door. "I saw you," Zhang said, breathless. 3 nights ago, carrying something heavy down from your hut. And tonight, I saw you testing the weight of rocks on the main road." Liu's jaw tightened. "You should forget what you saw." "I don't want to forget," Zhang said. His voice cracked slightly. "I want to help." Liu studied the boy's face. There was fear there, yes, but also something else. Anger. The same cold, quiet rage that Liu felt every time he thought about his brother. "Help with what?" Liu asked carefully. Zhang Wei swallowed hard. "With whatever you're planning to do to them." Liu was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded toward the rock sitting in the corner of the hut, covered with a dirty cloth. "Do you know what that is?" Liu asked. Zhang shook his head. Liu pulled the cloth away. "That," Liu said quietly, "is a bomb." Zhang's eyes went wide. Liu continued, "I'm going to put it on the main road. The convoy comes through every 2 weeks. Next time they'll drive over it, and the lead tank will lose its tracks." Zhang stared at the rock. Then he looked back at Liu. "Will it work?" "I don't know. What if it doesn't explode? Then I die for nothing." Zhang Wei was quiet. His hands were shaking. Then he said, "What do you need me to do?" Liu Deshi had never seen an American, but he had heard the stories. 6 months ago, a traveling merchant had passed through Shituwan, selling stolen goods from the cities. He had told a story about the flying tigers, American pilots flying for China, fighting the Japanese in the skies over Burma and Yunnan. "They fly old planes," the merchant had said, his eyes wide with excitement. "Curtiss P-40 Hawks, painted like sharks. The Japanese call them demons, but the Chinese call them heroes." "Why?" someone had asked. "Because they don't run," the merchant said. "Even when they're outnumbered 10 to 1, they don't run. They dive straight into the enemy formation and fight like madmen." Liu had never forgotten that story. Now, sitting in his hut with Zhang Wei, staring at the rock bomb, Liu thought about those pilots, flying trash planes against the best fighters in the world, and winning. "You know what I heard?" Liu said quietly. Zhang looked up. "I heard the Americans don't wait for permission to fight back. They don't ask if the odds are fair. They just fight." Zhang frowned. "But we're not Americans." "No," Liu said, "but we can fight like them." He picked up the rock and cradled it in his arms. It was heavy, cold, unremarkable. "The Flying Tigers don't have better planes," Liu said. "They just have better courage. And tonight, so do we." Zhang Wei stared at him for a moment. Then he nodded. "When do we move it?" "Tomorrow night," Liu said, "right before the convoy is scheduled to pass." The road was quiet. Too quiet. Liu Deshi crouched in the shadows at the edge of the forest, the rock bomb cradled in his arms. Zhang Wei was beside him, breathing heavily, eyes scanning the darkness. The main road stretched out before them, a dirt path carved into the mountainside, wide enough for 2 tanks to pass side by side. This was the route the convoys used. Every 2 weeks, like clockwork. Tomorrow morning, they would come again. Liu had scouted the location carefully. There was a slight curve in the road where the tanks would slow down to navigate the turn. And there, in the center of the path, was a natural depression, the perfect place to set the rock. It would look like it had always been there, but first, they had to get it there without being seen. "Stay low," Liu whispered. They moved quickly, staying in the tree line, their footsteps muffled by the carpet of dead leaves. The moon was hidden behind clouds, which was both a blessing and a curse. It made them harder to see, but it also made it harder to see the road. They reached the edge of the forest. Liu paused, listening. In the distance, maybe 200 meters down the road, there was a Japanese checkpoint. A small outpost with 2 guards and a single lamp hanging from a wooden post. If the guards heard them, it was over. Liu gestured to Zhang, "Wait here." He stepped out onto the road, moving slowly, carefully placing each foot to avoid crunching gravel. The rock was heavy in his arms, at least 20 kilograms. His muscles screamed, but he didn't dare set it down yet. He reached the depression in the road. He knelt down, setting the rock gently into place. It fit perfectly. He stepped back, examining it in the dim light. It looked completely natural, just another rock on a mountain road. Liu allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. Then he heard it. Footsteps. His blood turned to ice. He looked toward the checkpoint. One of the guards was walking up the road, a rifle slung over his shoulder, smoking a cigarette. A patrol. Liu's mind raced. If he ran, the guard would hear him. If he stayed, the guard would see him. He had seconds to decide. He dropped flat onto the ground, pressing his body into the dirt beside the road, praying the darkness would hide him. The guard's footsteps grew louder. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Liu held his breath. His heart was hammering so hard he was sure the guard could hear it. The footsteps stopped. Liu didn't dare move. He didn't even blink. Through the corner of his eye, he could see the guard's boots. They were less than 3 meters away. The guard took a long drag on his cigarette. The tip glowed red in the darkness. Then, the guard coughed. He spat onto the road, and he turned around and walked back toward the checkpoint. Liu waited until the footsteps faded completely. Then he slowly, carefully lifted his head. The guard was gone. Liu stood up, his legs trembling, and slipped back into the forest where Zhang Wei was waiting. Zhang's face was pale. "I thought you were dead." "So did I," Liu whispered. They didn't speak again until they were back at Liu's hut. Back in the hut, Liu sat on the floor, staring at the wall. Zhang Wei paced back and forth, nervous energy radiating off him. "It's done," Zhang said. "The rock is in place. Now we just wait, right?" Liu didn't answer. Zhang stopped pacing. "Liu, what's wrong?" Liu finally spoke. His voice was quiet, almost defeated. "There's no fuse." Zhang blinked. "What?" "I didn't put a fuse in the rock," Liu said. "I sealed it too early. I was so focused on hiding the powder that I forgot the most important part." Zhang's face went pale. "So, it won't explode?" "Not unless the weight of the tank crushes the powder hard enough to cause ignition," Liu said. "But that's unlikely. The clay seal is too thick. The powder needs a spark." Zhang sat down heavily. "So we failed." Liu clenched his fists. "No, not yet." He stood up and walked to the corner of the hut. He pulled out a small wooden box and opened it. Inside were a dozen thin strips of cloth, soaked in saltpeter, makeshift fuses his father had used for fireworks. "I have fuses," Liu said, "but I need to go back tonight. I need to drill a hole in the clay seal and insert the fuse before the convoy arrives." Zhang stood up. "I'll come with you." "No," Liu said firmly. "If something goes wrong, one of us needs to survive to tell the story." Zhang looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. Liu tucked the fuses into his jacket and picked up his chisel and a small hammer. "If I'm not back by dawn," Liu said, "burn this hut. Destroy everything. Don't let them connect you to me." Zhang nodded, his throat tight. Liu walked to the door. Then he stopped and looked back. "Thank you," Liu said quietly, "for believing in a stupid rock." Zhang tried to smile. "Give them hell." The road was even quieter the second time. Liu moved like a ghost, his footsteps silent, his breathing shallow. The chisel and hammer were wrapped in cloth to muffle any sound. He reached the rock. He knelt down beside it, his hands trembling. He positioned the chisel against the clay seal and tapped it gently with the hammer. Tap. The sound was louder than he expected. He froze, listening. Nothing. He tapped again. Tap, tap. A small crack appeared in the clay. He worked carefully, chipping away at the seal until there was a hole just wide enough for the fuse. He pulled out one of the cloth strips and inserted it into the cavity, pushing it deep into the black powder. Then he sealed the hole again with wet clay, leaving just the tip of the fuse exposed. He covered the fuse with a thin layer of dirt and pebbles, camouflaging it completely. When he was finished, he stepped back and examined his work. The rock looked exactly the same as before, but now it was armed. All it needed was pressure, the weight of a tank. Liu Deshi stood there for a moment, staring at the rock. Then he whispered, "For Xiaoming." He turned and disappeared into the forest. At this point, any sane person would have walked away. Liu Deshi had done everything he could. The rock was in place. The fuse was armed. The convoy would arrive in a few hours. But here's the question I want you to think about. Would you have the nerve to stay and watch? Because that's exactly what Liu did. He didn't go home. He didn't hide in his hut. He climbed a tree on the hillside, 50 meters from the road, and he waited. Waited to see if his stupid rock would work, or if it would just sit there, like every other rock on every other road. Dawn. The sky was gray when the convoy appeared. Liu Deshi saw them first as distant shapes on the horizon, dark silhouettes moving slowly along the mountain road. Then he heard the engines, the low mechanical growl of diesel motors grinding through the gears. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst out of his chest. He gripped the tree branch tighter, his knuckles white. The convoy consisted of 5 vehicles, one Type 97 Chiha tank in the lead, 2 troop trucks in the middle, 1 half-track with a mounted machine gun, and 1 staff car at the rear. Commander Sato was in the staff car. Liu could see him through the window, reading a map, completely oblivious. The tank rolled forward, its treads chewing up the dirt road. The commander, a different officer, not Sato, sat in the open hatch, scanning the tree line. With binoculars. He wasn't looking at the road. Why would he? It was just a road. Just rocks. Just dirt. The tank approached the curve. Liu stopped breathing. The driver downshifted. The engine noise changed pitch. The tank slowed slightly to navigate the turn, and then the left tread rolled over the rock. For one terrible second, nothing happened. The tank kept moving. Liu's heart sank. It didn't work, but then, boom! The explosion was louder than Liu had imagined. A column of fire and smoke erupted from beneath the tank, lifting the left side of the vehicle half a meter off the ground. The tread shattered, links flying in every direction like shrapnel. The tank lurched violently to the side and came to a grinding, screeching halt. The commander in the hatch was thrown forward, slamming his face against the metal rim. Blood poured from his nose. The entire convoy stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, chaos. Soldiers poured out of the trucks, shouting in Japanese, rifles raised, scanning the forest. The machine gunner on the half-track swung his weapon toward the tree line and opened fire. Rat-tat-tat-tat-tat! Bullets tore through the leaves, splintering branches, sending bark flying. Liu pressed himself flat against the tree trunk, his heart hammering, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The machine gun swept back and forth, blindly raking the forest. A bullet passed so close to Liu's head that he felt the wind. The soldiers were screaming orders, their voices sharp and frantic. "Ambush! Find them! Search the trees!" Liu didn't move. He didn't breathe. He became part of the tree. Down on the road, Commander Sato climbed out of the staff car. His face was pale. His eyes were wide with shock. He walked slowly toward the disabled tank, staring at the shattered tread, the scorched earth, the crater in the road. He knelt down and picked up a piece of the rock. Just a fragment of gray stone. Sato turned it over in his hands, his expression unreadable. Then he looked up at the mountains, and for the first time, Liu saw something he had never seen before in a Japanese officer's eyes. Fear. Commander Sato stood in the middle of the road, holding the fragment of rock in his hand. Around him, 30 soldiers were tearing apart the forest, searching for an enemy that wasn't there. The machine gunner had stopped firing. The forest was silent again, except for the sound of boots crashing through underbrush and officers shouting orders. Sato looked at the disabled tank. The left tread was completely destroyed. Twisted metal and broken links scattered across 20 meters of road. The explosion had also damaged the drive wheel. The tank wasn't going anywhere. But that wasn't what disturbed him. What disturbed him was the crater. It was small, precise, perfectly centered beneath where the tread had been. This wasn't a mine. Mines left jagged, irregular holes. This was something else. Sato called over his lieutenant, a young officer named Nakamura. "What do you see?" Sato asked, pointing at the crater. Nakamura knelt down, examining the scorched earth. He picked up another fragment of rock and sniffed it, his nose wrinkled. "Sulfur," Nakamura said. "Black powder, I think." "Black powder," Sato repeated slowly. "Not military explosives." "No, sir. This is primitive, homemade." Sato's jaw tightened. He looked at the mountains again, his eyes narrowing. "A farmer," he said quietly. "Sir?" This wasn't the resistance. This wasn't the communists. This was a farmer. Sato's voice was cold, measured. Someone with no metal, no resources, no training. Someone who used a rock. Nakamura stood up, confused. "How is that possible?" Sato didn't answer. He was staring at the fragment in his hand, turning it over and over, as if it held some secret he couldn't decipher. Finally, he looked at Nakamura. "Burn the village," Sato said. Nakamura's eyes widened. "Sir?" "Burn it," Sato repeated, his voice like ice. "Every house, every hut. I want the villagers to understand what happens when they defy the Empire. And I want whoever did this to watch their home turn to ash." "Yes, Commander." Sato turned and walked back to his staff car. He didn't look at the disabled tank again. He didn't need to. The message was clear. The Empire had been humiliated. And someone was going to pay. The first hour. The lockdown. Liu Deshi stayed in the tree for 2 hours after the explosion. He didn't move. He barely breathed. He watched as the soldiers searched the forest, poking through bushes with their bayonets, firing random shots into the darkness. But they never looked up. Finally, when the convoy gave up and continued down the road, leaving the disabled tank behind with a repair crew, Liu climbed down from the tree. His legs were numb, his arms were shaking, but he was alive. He stumbled through the forest, moving as quickly as he dared, heading back toward Chateau Wan. He had to warn Zhang Wei. He had to get out before the soldiers came. But when he reached the ridge overlooking the village, he stopped. Smoke. Black smoke, rising into the gray morning sky. Liu's stomach dropped. He ran. By the time Liu reached the edge of Chateau Wan, it was too late. The soldiers had already been there. Half the village was on fire. Flames licked up the sides of wooden houses, sending embers swirling into the sky. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burning rice straw. Villagers were gathered in the square, surrounded by soldiers with rifles. They were on their knees, hands behind their heads, faces streaked with soot and tears. Liu crouched behind a stone wall, watching, his heart pounding. He scanned the crowd, looking for Zhang Wei. There. The boy was kneeling near the back, his face pale, his eyes wide with terror. Commander Sato was standing in the center of the square, speaking in Mandarin. His voice was calm, almost conversational. Someone in this village, Sato said, knows who destroyed my tank. Someone is hiding a traitor. The villagers were silent. Sato continued, I am a reasonable man. I do not wish to punish the innocent, so I will give you one chance. Tell me who planted that bomb, and the rest of you will be spared. No one spoke. Sato sighed. He nodded to one of his soldiers. The soldier grabbed Chen Guang, the village leader, and dragged him forward. Chen was trembling, tears streaming down his face. Please, Chen begged. I don't know who did it. I swear I don't know. Sato drew his pistol and shot Chen Guang in the head. The sound of the gunshot echoed off the mountains. Chen's body crumpled to the ground. Several villagers screamed, others sobbed, but no one moved. Sato holstered his pistol and looked at the crowd. Next, he said calmly. Liu Deshi's hands were shaking. He could feel the weight of the knife on his belt. He could feel the rage boiling in his chest. He wanted to rush into the square. He wanted to kill Sato with his bare hands. But he knew he would die before he took 3 steps. And then the soldiers would kill everyone else too. His mind raced. What do I do? What can I do? He looked at Jiang Wei. The boy was staring at the ground, his fists clenched, tears running down his face. If Liu turned himself in, maybe Sato would spare the village. Maybe. Or maybe Sato would kill him, and then kill everyone anyway. Liu closed his eyes. He thought about his father's words. A man is measured by what he does when he has nothing left. He opened his eyes. He stood up, but before he could step out from behind the wall, a hand grabbed his shoulder and yanked him back down. Liu spun around, his knife halfway out of its sheath. It was an old man, Grandfather Hu, the village elder. His face was lined with age, his eyes sharp and clear. Don't, Hu whispered urgently. They're going to kill them, Liu hissed. And if you walk out there, they'll kill you too, Hu said. And then, this will all be for nothing. I can't just... You already won, Liu. Hu's voice was fierce. You destroyed their tank. You proved they can bleed. That's more than anyone else has done in 6 years. But the village will survive, Hu interrupted. We always do. But you need to run. You need to live, because if you live, others will follow your example. Liu stared at him, torn. Hu's grip tightened on his shoulder. Go, Hu said. Now, before they start searching the hills. Liu looked back at the square one last time. Jiang Wei was still kneeling there, his head bowed. Liu wanted to say goodbye, but there was no time. He turned and ran into the mountains. For the next 3 weeks, Liu Deshi became a ghost. He moved only at night, sleeping in caves and hollow trees during the day. He ate wild roots and drank from mountain streams. His clothes were torn. His face was gaunt. His hands were covered in cuts and bruises, but he was alive. The Japanese had sent search parties into the mountains, teams of soldiers with dogs combing through every valley, every ridge, every path. They were hunting him. Liu could hear them sometimes, in the distance, the barking of the dogs, the shouting of the officers. He stayed ahead of them, always moving, never stopping for more than a few hours. He didn't know where he was going. He only knew he couldn't go back. On the 14th night, Liu stumbled into a resistance camp. It wasn't much, just a handful of men living in a cave, armed with old rifles and homemade grenades. But they had something Liu hadn't seen in months: hope. The leader of the camp was a man named Captain Wu, a former nationalist officer who had refused to surrender after the Japanese invasion. He was in his 40s, with a scar across his cheek and eyes that had seen too much death. When Liu told him about the rock bomb, Wu didn't laugh. He didn't mock him. Instead, he leaned forward, his eyes intense. You destroyed a Chiha with a rock? Wu asked. Yes. And you used black powder? Yes. Wu sat back, a slow smile spreading across his face. Do you know what you've done? Wu asked. Liu shook his head. You've given us a blueprint, Wu said. Metal is scarce, explosives are scarce, but rocks? We have millions of them. And if one farmer can destroy a tank with a rock, imagine what 100 farmers could do. Liu blinked. He hadn't thought about it that way. Wu stood up and clapped Liu on the shoulder. You're not just a saboteur, Liu. You're a teacher, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows your name. Captain Wu had a radio. It was old, battered, held together with wire and hope. But it worked. Every night, Wu broadcasted messages to other resistance cells across Hebei province. He told them about Liu Deshi, about the farmer who had used a rock to fight back. He told them how to hollow out stones, how to mix black powder, how to place them on roads where the tanks would roll over them. And slowly, the legend began to spread. In villages across Hebei, farmers started disappearing into the mountains at night. They returned with rocks, heavy rocks, ordinary-looking rocks, and one by one, Japanese tanks started losing their treads. The Imperial Army tried to adapt. They sent soldiers ahead of the convoys to sweep the roads. They used metal detectors. They executed anyone caught with black powder. But it didn't matter. Because you can't stop a rock, you can't ban a rock, and you can't kill an idea. Liu Deshi never returned to Château. He spent the rest of the war moving from camp to camp, teaching other villagers his technique, refining the design, improving the fuse system. He became a legend, a ghost story that the Japanese told their new recruits to scare them. Beware the stone man, they said. He is everywhere and nowhere. He will turn your road into your grave. But here's the thing. Liu wasn't special. He wasn't a trained soldier. He wasn't a genius engineer. He was just a man who refused to stay silent. And that's the lesson. If you know another story like this, a story of someone who fought back with nothing but courage and creativity, share it in the comments below. Let's keep these legends alive, because the world needs to remember that even the smallest stone can topple the largest empire. Spring, 1945. The war was ending. The Japanese Empire was collapsing. The Americans had dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The emperor had announced surrender. In Hebei province, the convoys stopped rolling. The checkpoints were abandoned. The soldiers packed up and left, heading back toward the coast, back toward Japan. The villagers of Château emerged from their homes, blinking in the sunlight, unsure if it was real. Jiang Wei stood in the ruins of the village square, looking at the burned houses, the empty streets. Chen Guang's grave was marked with a simple wooden cross. So were 12 others. The price of resistance. But they had survived. And in a strange way, they had won. Liu Deshi came back to Château 1 month after the surrender. He was thinner now, older. His hair had streaks of gray, and his hands were scarred from years of working with stone and powder. Jiang Wei saw him first, walking up the mountain path, carrying nothing but a walking stick and a small canvas bag. Jiang ran toward him, tears streaming down his face. "Liu!" he shouted. "Liu! You're alive!" Liu smiled, a rare, genuine smile. The two men embraced. "I thought you were dead," Zhang said, his voice breaking. "I thought so too," Liu said quietly. "Many times." They walked together back to the village. Word spread quickly, and soon a small crowd had gathered. Grandfather Hu was still alive, impossibly old now, but still sharp. He looked at Liu with something close to pride. "The stone man returns," Hu said. Liu shook his head. "I'm not a legend, grandfather. I'm just a farmer." "Perhaps," Hu said, "but you taught us something important." "What's that?" Hu smiled. "That we don't need permission to fight back." Years later, after Liu Deshi had passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 68, the villagers of Château built a small memorial. It wasn't much, just a stone cairn at the side of the road near the spot where the rock bomb had exploded. On the cairn, they placed a bronze plaque with a simple inscription, "In memory of Liu Deshi, who fought the empire with a stone and won." Tourists rarely visit Chateau Yuan. It's too remote, too forgotten. But sometimes, a historian will make the trip. They'll stand at the cairn and ask the locals about the story, and the old people, the ones who remember, will smile and say, "The Japanese had tanks. They had machine guns. They had the best weapons in the world. But we had rocks. And in the end, the rocks won." The history books don't talk much about Liu Deshi. He didn't command armies. He didn't sign treaties. He didn't give speeches. He just made a rock explode. But sometimes, that's all it takes, because war isn't just fought with bullets and bombs. It's fought with ideas. And the idea that a farmer, with nothing but stone, sulfur, and courage, could cripple an armored division? That idea was more dangerous than any weapon. The Japanese army adapted, of course. They learned to sweep roads, they learned to avoid suspicious rocks, but they never learned how to stop the fear. The fear that every rock on every road might be the last thing they ever see. And that fear broke them long before the Americans arrived. Modern military historians have studied the stone landmine warfare of Hebei province. They've analyzed the tactics, the materials, the effectiveness. And here's what they found. Between 1943 and 1945, Chinese villagers using stone bombs destroyed or disabled an estimated 200 Japanese vehicles. 200. Tanks, trucks, half-tracks, all defeated by rocks. The Japanese called it Ishi no Jigoku, stone hell. They feared it more than conventional mines because they couldn't predict it. They couldn't detect it. They couldn't stop it. Because how do you fight a rock? Today, if you visit the military museum in Beijing, you'll find a small exhibit dedicated to the stone landmine warfare. There's a replica of a hollowed-out rock. There's a photo of Liu Deshi, grainy, black and white, his face weathered but determined. And there's a quote on the wall attributed to an anonymous Japanese soldier who survived the war. "We feared the Chinese army, we feared the Americans, but most of all, we feared the rocks, because the rocks meant we were never safe. Not on the roads, not in the mountains, not anywhere." So here's the lesson. You don't need the best weapons to win. You don't need the best training. You don't need permission from anyone. All you need is the refusal to accept defeat. Liu Deshi proved that. A farmer, a nobody, a man the empire dismissed as harmless. He took the most ordinary object in the world, a rock, and turned it into a symbol of resistance. And in doing so, he proved something the Japanese Empire never understood. You can occupy a country. You can burn its villages. You can kill its people, but you cannot kill an idea. And the idea that freedom is worth fighting for? That idea is harder than any stone. The rock that destroyed Commander Sato's tank was never recovered. It was blown to fragments in the explosion, scattered across the road, ground into dust by the treads of 100 other vehicles. But somewhere in those mountains, pieces of it still remain, buried in the dirt, waiting, reminding the earth that even the smallest stone can change the course of history.